Very first, right up front for us is truly Marvis, our crown jewel. This is, I'm going to introduce Bob Friday. Bob's the Chief AI Officer for Juniper Networks, was obviously the co-founder for Mist. We're stoked. We'll start with Marvis, and we'll be hitting off. So Bob, come on up.
Thank you, Sudhir. As Sudhir and Sujay say, this is my favorite event of the year because this is where we talk about the latest and greatest innovations around cloud AIOps networking. Now, when Sujay and I started this adventure, it was really with the observation that there was a fundamental paradigm shift. We still have to keep all these boxes green, AP, switches, and routers, got to keep all that stuff running. But what we learned from the customers was Wi-Fi was going from a nice to have to a must business critical, and they wanted to make sure whatever critical app they put on the network, whether it was going to be a consumer app or a robot, that was going to have a great experience. And that was the cloud AIOps paradigm shift. Yes, we keep all these boxes green, but we got to really start focusing on why that user is having a bad experience, regardless if it's one of our boxes. Now, someone talked about the AP. The reason that we started the company with the access point and we built that access point because we wanted to make sure that we were going to get the data we needed to answer the question of why you're having a bad mobile experience, bad Wi-Fi experience. Additionally, we remember Mist. We also believe that indoor location and connectivity were converging. And so we put a very special BLE antenna to make sure that we had location and connectivity conversion. Since we started at Juniper, you've seen us basically extend Marvis across the access point, the switch, and the SD-WAN router. And as we ingest more data, this lets us get to more granular root causes, right? That access point has a lot of information about the user state. That SD-WAN router has a lot of information about layer 3 and the applications running on it. And last year, what we brought to the party was Zoom. This is bringing the end-to-end loop to the end of the party, right? Now we have complete visibility on what that actual end-to-end user experience is going on for our Zoom. And we're going to be now talking about the innovations that we've done around our continuous learning aspect. What we're announcing new this year is starting to extend Marvis across these WAN routers, which is going to bring more WAN features into Marvis. When you look at what's going on in your network, it's not usually the wireless problem. The other big area here is the WAN connectivity. What is that mobile operator doing? When something goes wrong, half the time it's somewhere in that WAN router or in the mobile operator network that's connecting you to the internet. The other big announcement that we're bringing to the party this year is extending Marvis over the data center. This is really bringing branch and data center better together story. These are for business critical apps like point of sale, right? You have a business critical app running in your branch. It goes down. You need to immediately identify what layer of the network is causing a problem. Is it in my branch campus or is it in my data center? So this is the next critical innovation that you'll see coming down this year. And finally, we're bringing NAC. I think a lot of you have already seen it. This was announced last year. This is our new cloud NAC radius authentication service. And this is really going to bring into Marvis more visibility on that pre-connect. When users are connecting, when you have the Mist NAC, we're going to get better visibility on how that user experience is going. So the takeaway from this site is paradigm shift, client to cloud. This is where the networking, I think everyone has now realized it. 10 years ago, it wasn't quite so obvious. Now cloud AIOps is the talk of the town. Now, I think everyone's heard the journey. You've seen this slide. I think I've shown this slide for 6-7 years, ever since we've been doing MFD. And the reason this slide has not changed is because the foundational pillars of cloud AIOps has not changed, right? And the first element of this pillar we talked about is data, right? And the reason we built that access point, I think the sayings are important. Everyone knows me. I make a barrel of wine. Great wine starts with great grapes. Great AI starts with great data. And this year, what we're bringing to the party is Marvis Minis. This is probably the most exciting announcement of the year. What this is bringing is what do you do when there is no users on your network? Marvis Minis is basically the digital twin for your pre-connect and post-connect user experience. And we'll be talking more about this. But this is what allows Marvis now to make sure that your network is ready for when the business opens at 8 o'clock in the morning. So this is probably one of the critical announcements. AI starts the data. Marvis Minis is bringing a whole new set of data when we do not have users on the network to provide that data. The next big thing is really around this continuous learning experience, right? This is basically that SLE, service level experience, which was another fundamental shift. When you look at the SLEs inside of Marvis, they're based on the user minute. 20 years ago when I did aerospace, it was all about keeping track of the controllers and the APs and the network elements. We've moved that paradigm now. The fundamental unit is user minute. You're keeping track of that user state at all times. Every minute is that user having a good or bad experience on the network. Continuous learning is starting to bring that experience to our party now. And we'll be talking more about the innovations in that area. Data science, we're all using the same data science algorithms in the industry. We all have access to the latest and greatest data science algorithms. The big change here is really around bringing those out to the SLEs, what we're doing with our customer support and our data science team, right? This is where Mist has really differentiated itself, organizationally bringing these two teams together, and you'll see it in what we call our new application SLE. So this year, you'll see a new application SLE page that brings continuous learning, Zoom and Teams up to the forefront for our IT users. And then finally, conversational interface. Since we started Mist, we've had conversational interfaces since 2018. We fundamentally believe that natural language is the next generation user interface in the industry, in networking and other industries. We'll be talking about the 3 critical innovations that we're bringing into Marvis right now to make Marvis more human-like. How do we make it the interface of choice for interacting with your network and getting information from your network? And finally, what you'll hear from Wes and Sunalini is what are the latest Marvis actions. This is the self-driving component of Marvis. This is where we're starting to see customers trust Marvis to actually start issuing trouble tickets and taking action on their behalf when Marvis sees problems inside the network. Now, when you look at Marvis, Marvis has 3 critical customer-facing components. And we've talked about them. We have the conversational interface. This will become the new interface of choice for most networking teams going forward. You look at the industry, we all grew up with CLIs 20, 30 years ago. We moved to dashboards, and I know it's hard to say, eventually you have to give up on that CLI. I know it's like prying, something from your dead hands, but we have to move on to better ways of interacting because these networks are getting more complicated. Continuous learning, you'll see like 3 new innovations in this area. You'll be talking about adding teams into the mix, and we'll be talking about bringing a general model to the party and a new application SLE Dashboard here. And then the action framework, we'll hear from Wes and Sunalini more about what new actions Marvis is bringing to the table. When you look under the hood, Sudhir and others looking, he said, Bob, no one cares about your little data science models. I finally give agreement. Most people do not care about these data science models. But what you will realize when you look under the hood, machine learning is going on under there. The thing that is differentiating is going to be the deep learning. We saw it with ChatGPT. You will see in networking that these deep learning models are going to start to differentiate what's happening inside of networking. And when you look at AI, what I tell people, this is really the next step in the evolution of automation, right? The only thing with this step is we're starting to build solutions that can actually do things on par with humans. These solutions are starting to appear to have cognitive reasoning. You see it in your ChatGPT when you work, it's like, how did it do that? That's what these deep learning, these big language models are bringing to the party. They start to let you automate in new and different ways. This is why you may not need to understand the math under it, but you should understand what they're capable of doing.
To confirm, this includes RAG and vector database capabilities.
Yeah, if you look under the hood of, we'll go into CLIM, you'll see a whole RAG, and there's multiple use cases. That whole large language model stuff is bringing a whole set of new use cases to the party that we'll talk about here in a bit.
Very good.
The other thing I always remind people is, one of the reasons that Sujay and I left Cisco to start Mist, We knew that we wanted to have a blank sheet of paper. We built this cloud AI architecture. But the other fun reason, organizationally, if you want to solve this cloud AI ops problems, you have to make sure you get your data science team next to your support team. Your support team is the domain experts. They know what's going on in these networks. They see it every day. Your data science experts are the ones who understand the math and how to apply math to the problem. And you look and fundamentally, when we move into a cloud architecture, you find out that your support team is really a proxy for your customers. Because once we have the data in the cloud, everyone has access to the same data. The customer, the support team, anyone troubleshooting. That is the power of moving to the cloud. And you look what happens. This is my favorite chart. This is, stopping when you start this journey. And my favorite comment is, if a vendor is not using its own cloud AIOps and support, they have not started the journey to cloud AIOps. This is the first step in the journey. We started the journey in 2018. That orange bar shows you how long it took me to figure out why people were SSHing into APs and switches. You got to stop it. You got to get that data back to the cloud. And that's a cultural change for those who are in the networking business. Taking away SSH keys is this hard to do for your support team. The blue-red shows you that it's an endless battle, right? Up and down. This is a week-by-week battle on making sure that the data science and support team are reviewing the latest, greatest problems inside of the network.
A lot of people ask us, why does the blue, which is the good here, that Marvis was able to answer the question, why does the blue go down? And what happens is, as we solve problems and Marvis is able to answer questions, users are not going to open support tickets with that same problem. So essentially, the way you interpret this is every single week, we are solving newer and newer problem sets. And consequently, it gets harder and harder and harder because the easier problems are solved ahead in time. So Marvis is able to answer questions. So every single support ticket that Juniper missed, 100% of them, they first ask the question of Marvis and then say, hey, did Marvis have an answer? Did it directionally tell me the answer? Is the answer somewhere in the missed cloud? Is it in the back end of the cloud, or did I actually have to get to the AP? And you can see we still haven't conquered, any of those vectors in the sense, but continually making improvement. This is a scorecard for how AI is doing for us. This has been an honest to goodness, the absolute best thing in terms of measurements we've done is measuring ourselves.
Okay, that does not count against my minutes.
Yeah, how do you judge that the questions are getting more difficult?
Yeah.
Is there some metric that lets you know, yes, it's kind of flatlined on the blue,
Yeah.
but things are getting more complex? Is there some metric to also know we're not answering easy questions anymore?
We review this with the data science and support team once a quarter. We go through a list of all the questions we can't answer, and then we make pie charts of why we can't answer that. And what you quickly find out is we're getting to the bottom of the barrel. The easy hanging fruit, those are getting farther, and we're getting to a tail of hard questions.
Yeah. So we have categorization for every single ticket. There's categorizations of a broad category and a microscopic category, and then each week we're trying to knock off some of this, right? The power of the missed cloud. So we did 15 production pushes, major ones last year, and that's 15 opportunities for us to fix and move forward. That's where a controller-based platform or a cloud platform that you have to take offline every quarter to update, a legacy microservices architecture does not get it done, right? So for us, the agility of the cloud actually helps us move forward. It's all in the categorization.
And I would say back to the comment about hardware, by having our own access point, switch, and router, there's a whole device health element to this, where Marvis actually keeps track of the health. That's, a chunk of those support tickets are divided into the hardware. There's a hardware component that we fix.
It's Rocky on the stream. So what are those hard questions? What are the things that Marvis can't answer today?
Yeah, so Rocky, great question. So examples are where there's a lot of dependency on the customer side, adjacent subsystems, right? So if, let's say, their core router is dropping packets on a certain VLAN when we switch to the backup data center. This happened at one of the largest universities we run in the country from a complete wireless network perspective. And that was so far out of the realm of what we touch and see, and so that's a question they'll say, hey, yeah, no, Marvis didn't get that answer. So it's as the problem space expands beyond our subspace, that's where it becomes harder. Yeah.
So when you talk about an answer, somebody is having a problem, do they get an answer, or is an action also taken by Marvis on the infrastructure?
Great question. So if you look at to Drew's question, how does in the first customer's case, we replaced, that was Gap, 24,000 APs from a different vendor without adding a single extra access point or adding a new cable. We've cut their site visits by 85%. ServiceNow, we cut their incoming support tickets from users by 90%. How do we do this? Is it just all Marvis telling you, hey, you got to take this action, that action? No. We are the first and honest to goodness true self-driving network in the industry. What does that mean? What that means is when we see a problem, that could be a problem, and these are intrinsic to our system. That means a software on an AP, a hardware on an AP, a switch, or a router, where let's say you take a software process. If the software process is crashing, as Bob said, we watch the health of every single access point, every single software process on the access point. And if we could reset it without waking up IT, we do. I'll give you an example. If the Ethernet chip on an AP suddenly was happy and healthy and suddenly sees CRC error, suddenly seeing spikes of stuff, right? And then we say, hey, I could reset that Ethernet chip without waking up the IT team. We do. If the problem space comes back after several tries and is like, hey, this thing is coming back, we issue a proactive automate to our customer and say, hey, we have an AP in your ceiling that we would like back, and here's a brand new AP to you. Proactive automate. But absolutely 100%, we take actions, remediating software and hardware issues intrinsic to our system.
And that accounts for a lot of fewer support tickets.
Yeah.
So what happened in the middle? You see all this, you see how you guys have evolved over and over time, and in the middle you see that you start to not be able to answer the questions, and then this spike. Like what was going on there?
Every single week is a brand new week. It literally could go down next week, right? It's because the problem space is different. That's and that's why this is Bob's way of holding ourselves accountable, saying, don't fool yourselves. Yeah, you have that middle was 50%. Yeah, it's a harder problem space that we hit.
Yeah, my theory was the customer support team is a proxy for our customers. If we cannot keep them happy, there is no way we're going to keep our customers happy.
So do you have a question?
Yes, sir.
You said that based on, monitoring what's happening with the access point in terms of resources or any bug issues, right? So who takes the action of doing that? Like, is it the team assigned to your account, or who does that action? Because
No. Yeah. So the automated actions that we're talking about, that's a data science model that's running in the cloud, and we can't willy-nilly keep going, rebooting, resetting, process it. We get it. And so one of the things, the boldest statement I ever make, and people will call bullshit on it, and that's okay. We want them to be a customer and challenge us. Marvis is never wrong. How do we make that statement? Because we drive efficacy. It takes 6 weeks to write code, maybe 6 weeks to test code. We take 9 months to drive efficacy into every single Marvis action. And so anything that is self-driving, it's near 100% efficacy. We have determined that with extreme high confidence, if we take that action, we're going to only do good, right? And so it's the efficacy that we've built into each of these Marvis actions. Our largest customer today has 300,000 access points deployed in one production cloud, for their global network. No other cloud in the industry can touch, even 100,000 APs in one instance, right? That customer can tell you Marvis is never wrong, right? And that's the efficacy we've driven. Bob, I know they're going to kick us out of the room. So
Okay.
Keep going.
Let me make up some time here. So this is what I call the collaboration canary in your network coal mine. When your network starts to have throughput, latency, jitter problems, it is going to be your video collaboration users that first experience that problem. right? And last year, what we announced is basically continuous learning, where we're taking Zoom data, right, and join it with network feature data from your client, from your wireless network, from your switched LAN network, and from your SD-WAN routing network. Taking those network features and building a model that can now accurately predict video latency plus or minus 20 milliseconds at 90% accuracy. Now, once you have a model that can actually do that, actually predict something accurately, then you can use what we call Shapley, explainability algorithms, can now basically give you a ranking feature of what network feature, how each network feature is contributing to that prediction, right? Now, what we're bringing to the party this year and announcing is Teams. So last year, we basically heard everyone say, hey, that's great, but how about Teams? So now we're introducing, similarly, a model that takes your Teams session information, combines it with your network feature data, and predicts your Microsoft Teams performance level. This will basically allow us to bring the collaboration canary coal mine feature to 90% of our Fortune 500 customers. Almost 90% of all our customers either have Zoom or Microsoft Teams now as their video collaboration tool. The other thing we're bringing to the party is an application SLE page, right? This will now give you direct visibility of how many bad Zoom Teams minutes are running on your network. And it'll quickly start to be at a site level. It will start to let you quickly figure out what layer of your network is causing post-connection Zoom users the most pain. Is it your client? Is it your wireless link? Is it your LAN link? Is it your WAN connection? This is the problem with most of these features, is it's not one thing or other. It's a combination of things that's causing pain in your network feed. There are occasions we'll talk about on the client side where there may be something like a VPN, this configured VPN server we found, that will cause a lot of users pain. That this will quickly find the needle in the haystack problem. Probably the most exciting thing that we're bringing to the party this year, bringing that to the party, is what I call a general model. What you see here, there is no Zoom, there is no Teams data, right? This is similar to a large language model. This is a model that can basically predict what the performance of your Zoom and Teams users will be on your network. We actually had a very large retail customer who was having a problem. We applied this to that network to see what was going on. Basically informed us that we needed to basically take the channel bandwidth from 40 megahertz down to 20 megahertz, right? Because we're seeing a lot of interference. That's the power of a general model that can look at a network and start to predict what is the Zoom and Teams experience going to be like on this network.
This question, are you planning on heading this direction or the reverse? You did Teams and Zoom. Were you looking at going and hitting all the other SaaS providers individually, or is the goal to go and go more general rather than individual, hitting each one by itself?
I'll let Sunalini talk to the roadmap. I would say there are visions right now of where to take this next, right? Zoom and Teams are probably the big applications. The other thought is to work with app monitoring companies. Start bringing in a more general look across all the apps.
But the short answer, Keith, is the most stringent apps on our network are the collaboration apps, like the voice video apps. In fact, the problem space with voice and video apps right now is, if your CEO had a Teams issue, everybody's going to jump up and down and go and fix it. But if the average user in the enterprise is having a Teams issue or a Zoom issue, we never get to the root cause of it. It just passes by because these things are transient, right? So we took the hardest one so we can get this data and build truly a model that right now we're consuming, no joke, millions of user minutes on every single day perspective. And so we're learning with millions of user minutes. The analogy there is large language models learned on billions of, trillions of data points, right? And so we're learning this. And if we could crack this, it's game over. Then I don't need to connect to Salesforce and a SaaS application or ServiceNow or something else. That's the goal. This is building a general model that can truly become the game changer.
How much of this data that you're collecting is from the actual application itself? So you got Zoom, you got Teams. Are you are you taking that from the client that's on the device, or are you doing some sort of API tie-in to these applications?
These are enterprise customers taking it directly from the Zoom Teams API. So Zoom and Teams both have APIs that keep data per minute or per session on all the sessions on the network. I think this reiterates what Sudhir said. You can visualize that if you look at ChatGPT. They built a very large language model, trained it on trillions of words of data to predict the next word. What we're doing here is taking billions of video collaboration data points from Zoom Team users and building a model that is predicting your Zoom Teams experience. So that is the power of deep learning models, right? This is what is going to differentiate and transform what's happening in networking.
So should it actually? I mean, should we expect to see this? I mean, I'd love to kind of personally see it in Marvis Minis, for example. I mean, I initially showed application SLEs, for example, right? Yeah. So I know Marvis Minis kind of shows some stuff in there, but I mean, I'm visioning, thinking like this showing up in Marvis Minis because Marvis. You're using. I mean, we're using your network. I mean,
you're going to get there in like
Juniper and Mist devices, right? So it knows what exactly we are, accessing different applications.
Right.
So it can tell me which applications are having issues and problems.
Perfect.
Basically.
We'll speak to that.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is Roel, to your point, large language model that ingested words, large experience model that's ingesting the experience minutes from these real-time applications. First time in the industry. Right, so there's real opportunity here. So anyway, Ali, let me start with what does this do? We are super excited because for the last 7 years in the Mist dashboard, you saw wireless, wired, and WAN as the 3 service levels that you saw with insights and stuff. Today, for the first time, we are revealing an application SLE, right? And what this is doing is it's basically collating all the user minutes we see at a given site or a given access point, at any level of granularity, and say, okay, I had 4,700 total user minutes on that site today from a collaboration perspective. 233 minutes were bad, and then you say, okay, let me go dive into exactly why. So this is basically saying, let's dissect that 233 minutes. It says WAN was a huge contributor for that. And then you go in and say, okay, now show me more. Is this a WAN? By the way, in this particular example, only the Wi-Fi was Juniper Mist, right? The wired network, the WAN network. This is the power of the Shapley model. We can look at so many parameters that we don't have to actually directly get. This is, again, if you do some research on this, Bob and Navraj, our data scientist, introduced us to this thing, and it's game-changing in that I could say, hey, this cohort of users are having an issue. What's commonality for them? They're all sharing the same WAN link, or they're sharing the same APs in an IDF. They're sharing the same SSID, same VLAN. Maybe they're all on VPN. So it's developing cohorts and making meaning of those cohorts. That's where this is headed. And so we're launching this with Zoom and Teams. This should be available for Mist customers as part of their Marvis subscription in the next 90, 120 days or so. But brand new SLE will basically get you down to Jane in finance had an issue with Teams. No one's going to jump up and down and saying, let me go get down to that particular Teams call. No, I can take you down to Jane's laptop and say, hey, what was the loss latency and jitter? I have an enumeration of every single Teams call that she's gone through. Pick an individual Teams call that she may have complained about and say, during that specific time, there was a WAN issue or maybe client side, right? So there's incredible value in going from at a site level, at an org level, saying what's all that is happening, and then taking it down to an individual call. First time in the industry, we're taking all the way down to an individual call and the experience, right? So now
it's Rocky again.
Yeah, go ahead.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
I see clients listed, and all of us in Wi-Fi know that a big percentage of the issue is clients. So how deep and how much data are you gathering without a client agent in that, hey, it's the client?
Super, good question. So on the client side, actually what we're doing is we're not installing any new agents. We're actually leveraging the agent that is the Teams agent and the Zoom agent. And we're basically getting from Zoom and Teams cloud to cloud. So we don't have to ask for a new agent to be installed, cloud to cloud, and say, on the client side, we get things like, what's the CPU during the exact Teams call that was happening? So at one of our customers, the CPU on certain clients was actually contributing to it. And how does that correlate? For example, if I'm downloading a big Microsoft update or a Mac OS update during the time I was having this Teams call, a normal user would not correlate those two things as having impact, but it does have impact, right? Another thing we get from client, Rocky, is VPN as an example. Was the client using VPN? Where are they ingressing, egressing? That kind of stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
So let's say it's not Teams and Zoom that are the issue. How much data are you able to gather and see about a client? So let's say that it's the, senior director, VP in the corner office, and their Spotify is flipping, right? And we get the call. How much are we able to see from the network side about the client, and how much data are you pulling in to see that?
Again, we have a different agent for, if they are not Teams and Zoom, we use our Marvis client agent. If people are willing to install that, we do have that agent. That gives us RSSI, driver level detail, driver type detail, all of that kind of stuff. One of our customers has about 40,000 APs. They've deployed this on 200,000 handhelds, our Marvis client. And so we're able to get that kind of data. But not application data. Marvis clients today focus on layer 2.
What about the Marvis agent?
So there is a Marvis client, you just aren't as much utilizing it for Teams and Zoom, or you're enriching
so
that
for Teams
data
and
from
Zoom,
their
we're not installing another agent, but for if the option exists for, and Slava is going to speak to, hey, some of the onboarding stuff we're doing, there is an aspiration for a grander client that Slava is going to speak to. I won't steal his thunder, but that will also have Marvis. I interrupted you, sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. So Marvis agent, right? I know for handheld devices, it is available. I know, then there was like a Windows agent.
Correct.
What's the status of the development of the Windows agent and Mac, possibly? I think there was an announcement.
And with iOS 17, there's possibilities on Mac. Sorry, on iPhone, right? So Slava will address all of those and the timing of that. Yeah. All right.
Hey, this is Kevin Franzen from the branch. You mentioned these are enterprise customers. Is there any interaction needed to enable this, or this just works? And
Great question. So Kevin, so they do connect their Teams or Zoom. They get we get an API token, and it's a base subscription on Teams and Zoom. Zoom has additional options. They don't have to choose those. We're connecting with their base Zoom subscription using an API token that they would share. They would input into the MIS dashboard.
Another question. You mentioned that some of this visibility is done with just the APs. If this was a full Juniper site, do you have more visibility?
So I think the question, Kevin, was, does it need to be a full Juniper site? The answer is no. As long as just Wi-Fi was Juniper missed, everything you saw is still possible.
No. So the question is, if it is a full Juniper site, are you able to see more into the network and have more visibility?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So if there is SD-WAN from us, we get application input into this Shapley model. If there is switching from us, we take additional input into the model. Yeah. Awesome. A couple of quick customer stories. I think we're severely late at this point, but basically, ServiceNow. This was a great example. This is their their Hyderabad call center. Essentially, some people were complaining. Specific cohort of people were complaining, and the Shapley model said, hey, these guys, their VPN is egressing out of Sydney while the users were sitting in Hyderabad. True story, and it was interesting that nobody actually cared to look in that kind of format. Dartmouth College, this is a great example. Brian Ward, a lot of you guys know. Basically, this was a corner office. The executive has his own dedicated AP, and so why would there be a capacity issue? Life was good. But this model was saying, hey, there's a capacity issue. And Brian said, no, I don't think so. Let's duke it out. And turns out what ultimately was happening was, Dartmouth runs the largest hotspot in higher ed, where actually they have a wide open network. And so passerby passing that building constantly connecting to this AP from this executive, and that was actually challenging. So I'll skip some of the example, Bob. Come on up. We got to catch up on time. Marvis Minis.
Okay. So as a data scientist, Marvis Minis is probably the most exciting announcement of the year because it's bringing data to the party that we did not have before. The other reason why this is exciting is because similar to the general large experience model, we are now able to predict a user's experience before they actually get on the network. The other big thing for me personally was making sure this was part of our cloud architecture. And what does that mean? That means speed of innovation. That means we can innovate Marvis Minis during our weekly production pushes, right? This is not part of my firmware build. This is part of my cloud architecture now. Secondly, we're bringing it to the switch. So that also brings more data from our switch wired network into Marvis now of what's going on inside that LAN network. And thirdly, it looks at both the pre-connect and post-connect experiences. Pre-connect is focused on making sure that authentication, DHCP, DNS service is up and running and going. We're also making sure critical applications up and running before the door opens. And we're bringing a speed test to Marvis Minis. This starts to give us visibility into that WAN connection and throughput connection before the doors open up in the morning. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sudhir to catch us up.
Let's go.
I did my part.
Quick question on that. Will we be able to customize the speed test? Possibly, like if I want to use like a server in my data center or something like that, like iPerf, or use any?
Not right now.
No? Okay.
Not right now. It's yeah. So for those that may not have seen or known what Marvis Minis is, let me actually just give you a very quick view of what this is. What today Marvis actually does an extremely good job of understanding users' experience and pinning down on what was happening with an individual user. But a lot of times, I mean, if we ask the more and more CIOs we speak to, their number one concern and issue is, I want to know before my users have failure. I want to know before anybody experiences failure. And that's where we launched the first sort of digital twin in the industry from a user experience perspective. The industry generally, when they speak of digital twins, they speak of network emulation. We've always been focused on the user, and this is about understanding the user's experience. And so being able to actually assert problems before users come on the network or experience failure. And so what we are super excited to launch today is, and again, I think a lot of the Marvis Minis piece is, classic Mist style. We want this to be super easy to deploy, meaning there is no configuration. You deploy Mist access points, and if you have the Marvis subscription, Minis are just automatically running. What does that mean? We learn your SSIDs, we learn your VLANs, we learn your DHCP, your DNS, your radius. This is not our grandfather's sensor network where you have to set up everything, or if something else changes on the network, I have to go tweak that. This is a modern cloud-native digital twin experience. And so if a failure happens, I actually have a dynamic packet capture waiting for me in the cloud, right? So really cool stuff. Well, that's great. That's what we said, earlier in January. What are we launching today? What we're launching today is Marvis Minis, is now incorporating, the switching, authentication from the switching side. So this is step one, and I'll get to Ali where you're talking about the experience bits. So today, Marvis Minis is basically saying, okay, I can actually ascertain, DHCP, DNS, radius, some level of applications where, we learn the major SaaS applications and we are validating. This is an example where DHCP was failing. I have a PCAP waiting for you. Now, let's take this to the WAN speed test. Today, and this is the early days, the first version, we're launching basically access points running, speed tests once a day just to establish what is the maximum bandwidth at this site, and obviously you can customize this thing. And then switches starting to do radius validation every hour to say, I'm able to reach radius and able to authenticate with radius. So again, a little bit more data, to Bob's point, the more data, the better Marvis is. now let's talk about where this could get even more interesting. This is brand new that we're launching today, where we are now basically saying, how do we get more visibility into application performance, right? And so the idea is essentially leverage your infrastructure, use this digital twinning experience to say, okay, I want to define or I want to learn, these are some of the top applications at this site. Let's say, as an example, I pick Teams as an example and say, okay, I want to know the performance of Teams across all my sites, across loss, latency, jitter. So these are all my sites. I want to know and bucketize my sites for me on what's my average latency across my entire organization. And so you can immediately get to the outliers on saying which sites are actually having persistently, bad latency or larger latency than others, right? So first gives you an organizational view of site bucketization of application performance. Then you go in and say, okay, I want to now pick, a particular site across all my applications. I want to know in that particular site, what is the loss, latency, jitter across all these applications. So now, again, this is another application. This is the bucketization of the latency for those applications. Again, no sensors, no additional hardware, nothing to set up, constantly always running and having the data at your fingertips. And so this is getting you proactive. If something changes at a site where it jumps from its normal latency to something new, we catch it. And now I zoom into an individual site here, right? This is the same site. All 5 applications that I'm showing, their continuous experience. So constantly we're validating application performance. And this is where, Ali, we are getting closer to not requiring additional servers and sensors, just using the network to validate app performance. Ruel.
Yeah, I like the idea of testing the application. I know Marvis Minis are initiated from a neighboring AP to another one. But will you incorporate data, because I know you're showing average latency and all that. Will you be able to show us too, like the AP it's connecting to and how many clients were connected to that AP? Because I would like to know if that latency is driven by whatever else is going on with the clients associated.
Good, yeah, great question. This is phase 1, step 1, right? Lots of possibilities. When we launched Marvis Minis in January, I genuinely feel we have a 3-year roadmap of things that we could do that could truly be game changing, right? So this is step 1. We are laying down the foundations and infrastructure. The one difference between January and May 2024 is we've made Marvis Minis completely sort of the very first time we've asked our customers to upgrade to a certain firmware version. From now on, Marvis Minis is an extension of the cloud, new functionality, don't have to touch firmware. It's just a new push from the cloud type of stuff. So we're laying down the foundation. This is the very first phase of it. Lots of possibilities.
You mentioned something about when you mentioned about radius, right? So is that from the switch, but is it also testing like from the access point?
It does. Access point we already have.
Because you run into sometimes a scenario, for example, where somebody wants to add access point IPs in the radius server, right? Like individually or something like that, or somehow it got missed or something like that.
Correct.
It will test that as well.
Access points. So the way Marvis Minis, so obviously it's testing all the time. This application performance, as an example, we're doing this every 5 seconds. We're constantly validating everything. From a radius test perspective, essentially what we do is, we test, and if everything is okay, no harm, no foul.
Sure.
But if we find one AP failed the radius test, immediately we start a blast radius determination. Oh, is that one AP? Is it just these APs on this switch? Is it these APs in this closet? Is it this floor? Is it this building? That site? So Marvis Minis is designed to slowly expand scope to tell you, hey, all of the eastern corridor is actually having a radius issue because the clear path for that thing is down, right? Something like that. So it has the blast radius determination.
Okay. And the last question is like, will there ever be an availability where I can maybe possibly add a user and some credentials in there to test against that?
Not yet, but we'll get there. But today you can instigate a test now. The test now button actually can go do all of the tests right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. I'll skip some of the stories on Marvis Minis in the interest of time. Sorry. Sorry.
I was just going to ask, like, how is this data like distributed out to become actionable? Like if you know that it's a radius problem, can you just set up Marvis or the dashboard to package up some screen grabs or reports or data and like send it over to the radius team so they can fix their stuff, or the teams people so that they can know, or the WAN people so that you're not just digging down into the weeds to like look at charts and feeds,
Super. Yeah.
but like do something about it?
Correct. Great question. So the way we've actually done this is all of the Marvis Minis from the rest of the system perspective looks like an actual user. And so if we determine that, hey, radius is actually unavailable for this segment of the network, that today turns into a Marvis action, which throws a webhooks into a ServiceNow or their automation tool, and that's how it becomes actionable. And then we take all this data and attach to that, right? And so yeah, so that's how. So the consumption northbound from our system is always webhooks through a Marvis action. Awesome. I think again you get the stories. In the interest of time, we have one more section, Bob. So I'll let you speak to that.
So we're going to do a little bit more on conversational interface. And I think someone brought it up earlier. So this journey, as I said, started back in 2018. We started this journey with natural language understanding technology back in 2018. We started with real-time troubleshooting questions. So we got very good at understanding what people were asking us and being able to respond to these real-time troubleshooting. What we announced last year was really around knowledge base. With OpenAI and ChatGPT, what they brought to the party was natural language generation. They gave Marvis a voice. We were very good at understanding the question. Now we're getting very good at answering the question like a real human. And where that's leading to is a much more natural dialogue interface with Marvis in the future going forward. When you look under the hood of Marvis, what you see is we basically have built a platform, an architecture that has multiple LLM pipelines for multiple use cases. So depending on what use case you're solving, you'll find different open source large language models under the hood of Marvis AI. The first use case that we mentioned was real-time troubleshooting, right? This is where we have a query classification algorithm that classifies what type of query question is the customer asking us. Real-time troubleshooting goes down one path. What we talked about last year was knowledge base, right? That is where we basically started getting much better. We've always been able to retrieve documents for users' questions. We're starting to summarize those documents, right? And that's what ChatGPT brought to the party, was solving that doc search summarization use case. And that's what everyone in the industry is working on. And I would say, if there's anyone working on this, we're right at the leading edge. Please look me up. I'm happy to compare notes. I think we're all in the same boat trying to figure out what's going on with large language models that are changing weekly. The other big thing we're announcing this year is customer support. Similar to that real-time efficacy chart, you will see an efficacy chart for support questions now for knowledge. How well are we answering them? Back to that same theory. If customer support's not happy, customers are not going to be happy. And finally, what we're looking forward in the future is starting to put large language models on top of SQL. This is basically letting our customers start to explore their own network data. Think this is an alternative to BI. Large language model will become another way to know what's going on in your network on top of your data. And I would say this is the other new chart you'll be seeing. Basically, for every knowledge-based question that comes into our support team, about half of it, half the questions that come in are real-time troubleshooting. The other half are some sort of, how do I configure my 4400? Where do I find something? These are the questions that LLM is going to get very good at answering. The green and the yellow start to show you how well Marvis is doing at answering those tickets for every support ticket that comes into our network right now. You can see in the scheme of things, same thing like the other one, we want to get up around 80%. But probably the blue here represents, hey, just wrong. Good news is, hey, it's only 20, 30%. So we're off to a good start. We want to get that down to 80% going forward.
Hey, Bob, who is asking these questions? Are these trained IT operators that know how to properly form a question and know what they're looking for? Are these first level help desk. When I go to talk to enterprises, they're like, yeah, no, we don't let our help desk type questions into the chat bot in order to get data back. They're like, heck no, we don't want them to do any of that. And so if the quality of question is coming from a trained source, then that's way different than Joe Blow going, why is my Wi-Fi broken?
I would say what we found is a use case, what we call bring your own question, like an SE or a customer asking a general network question. Those are relatively easy to answer. The questions we see coming into this customer support team are usually much harder, much more specific. Once someone issues a support ticket, it's usually, and it's a range of beginner to expert. It means that they were not able to find the answer inside the documentation usually.
To your point, Sam, a lot of them are, they haven't spent the time. They're either new to us or new to the industry, and they just want to get something done fast. And the fastest way, instead of searching and analyzing, is, hey, support, can you tell me how I do this, right? And they could search in our documentation, do it themselves. They open a ticket today, and maybe, Bob, if you click one more, essentially what we're trying to do is essentially get to support ticket deflection to leverage this piece for, so essentially today, you could ask these questions within Marvis. People can self-serve within the Marvis dashboard, ask a certain question. But if, let's say, they didn't, or they didn't know how to, or they didn't have Marvis subscription, or they didn't want to do this, how do I actually, when I open a support ticket, and if I type in, hey, what the hell do these 3 blinking LEDs mean? This is not a Jane in finance kind of question. This is someone in IT in help desk, saying, hey, I got to set this IP up or something, and that deflection. Right now we're at 11%. So 11% of our questions are getting deflected by, we provided the right answer and they didn't even open the ticket.
But I would tell you, Sam, for anyone who complains about documentation, this puts a big bright light on it.
I bet it does. I bet it does.
11% is right now. We have aspirations to do a little bit more, but
on this, I know you.
Is this like an internal chat GPT?
So we are exposing this to our customers through the Marvis Conversational Interface, but we're going to embed it into everywhere, right? So Juniper documentation will have an LLM front end to it, right? Our support tickets will have an LLM front end to it, but we got to get the efficacy to the right place where we feel comfortable to throw people over that. Because again, hallucination is a real thing with OpenAI and ChatGPT, and you don't want to send people on wild goose chases, right? So Sunalini, let's catch us up. Yeah, there you go.
So Sudhir said he can speak fast. I will speak even faster. I have roughly 30 seconds to cover this 1 minute video. But the really cool thing, when Bob started the session, he talked about more telemetry coming into Marvis to always answer the question of what is impacting the end user experience. We talked about how we are pulling Zoom in Teams labeled user session data. What we are doing with this now, again, taking it to the next level, is pulling in telemetry from the data center, because oftentimes you have customers who have apps, SaaS applications, as well as data center applications. For an end user sitting in the branch and the campus, when an issue happens, how do you know which layer of the network is the problem in? So with what we've done here, what used to be Marvis applications now says Marvis data center applications. And now I can actually go from my Marvis for branch and campus into Marvis the data center and see exactly what the issues I have in my Juniper Abstract controlled data center and pull that back into my branch and campus solution. So for your network operations team, Sam, you spoke about the level 1 help desk. They now have access to Marvis. They can actually see when the ticket comes in, oh, wireless is clean, wired is clean, WAN is clean. I have a data center problem. Let me escalate, like Jen, like you said, escalate the data center team to say, hey, the problem's right here. It's impacting these 5 users in my branch.
Do something.
Go do something. Right?
But you're not pulling your data center gear into the dashboard. You're just asking Apstra.
I'm pulling anomalies from Abstract into Marvis.
But you're not using it for like inventory control and configuration and all that stuff.
That
right?
stays in Abstract.
Stays in Abstract.
Yeah. So from a day 2 perspective, from an AIOps end-to-end assurance perspective, data center was our next sort of building block. Yeah. We're pulling that into the branch and campus solution. So again, all about the end user, all about the end user experience. How do we give that seamless view to say where is the issue impacting these end users?